he's going to throw. Metcalf makes the catch. Touchdown! The Seahawks are back in the game. Akers up the middle, into the end zone.
This may be the drive that puts the nail in the coffin.
Robert Woods walks in. Touchdown, LA! The Rams are going to win this football game.
I'm not going to lie. Once I knew my Giants had no shot, I was kind of rooting for Seattle to be in the Super Bowl, but that is clearly not the case. Look who's here, my guy from the University of Connecticut. There he is.
What's
Dan
up?
Orlovsky. Hi, Dan.
What's up, puppies?
What's up? Oh, my gosh. Stephen A., you're up first. Look at his face. Stephen A., be excited. You've got a new show today. It's all starting. I'm going to ask you about it later. Be in a better mood, would you?
Last night.
I'm just saying you should bring up Connecticut
Shout
when
out
there's
to
a
the Huskies.
basketball topic. But when it's football, I don't understand why you always mention UConn. It's just me. It's just me. But go ahead.
He's just my brethren. Okay. We'll keep it going. Stephen A., was it a mistake? I can't believe I'm asking this, but was it a mistake for the Hawks to prioritize Russell Wilson when we talk about how poor their defense was?
Believe it or not, I'm going to say yes. And that's not an indictment, Dan and Max, against Russell Wilson. We know that he's a stud and he's a star, even though he did not look that way Saturday. Obviously got sacked 5 times. They were pressuring him a lot. He helped the situation because I thought he was holding on to the ball a little bit too much, helping the collapse, to have the pocket collapse against him. I thought that Pete Carroll's game plan was relatively too conservative. He threw the ball 27 times. He ran the ball 25 times, even though Chris Carson was decent. The bottom line is he was no Sam Akers. Sam Akers was balling Saturday. I mean, he was a man amongst boys running a football for L.A., considering what happened to Wolford and obviously Jared Goff coming in there with the broken thumb just 13 days removed from surgery and still being able to perform the way that he did. He wasn't stellar by any stretch of the imagination, but the bottom line is he did what he needed to do. But it was about L.A.'s defense, and it was about 2 things that really stood out in my mind. Take away the touchdown, 51-yard touchdown pass to DK Metcalf on a broken play. He had 4 receptions for just 45 yards. Tyler Lockett was virtually non-existent. What was it, 2 receptions for like 43 yards? I mean, my Lord, he was only targeted 4 times. That speaks a lot about the Rams defense, the Rams secondary, their ability to get to the quarterback, not giving Russell Wilson but so much time, but primarily about Jalen Ramsey and what he's been able to do this season going up against Seattle. I just can't say enough about it. In the end, when I think about Seattle, and the point that I want to get to is that they went to 2 Super Bowls and won a title because primarily it was about the Legion of Boom. The Super Bowl that they lost was when they decided to put the ball in the hands of Russell Wilson and throw a pass instead that got intercepted, obviously, instead of giving the ball to beast mode Marshawn Lynch at the half-yard line when this dude had been running roughshod and doing his thing in the second half of that particular Super Bowl. So I look at it from the standpoint that the mystique of the Seattle Seahawks has been lost along the way over the last few years. He's great, sure, but in the end, it's about defense. Let the defense lead the way. And since they've prioritized Russell Wilson, that hasn't been the case. We know he's great, but the team hasn't been great because of it.
I totally disagree. First of all, quarterbacks have a window of greatness, 10, 15 years, and defense is generally 3 to 5. So where would you put your money? But secondly, I think what's overlooked is Seattle's offensive line is where they went wrong. Remember the Max Unger trade? They trade their excellent first-round pick center on the offensive line for Jimmy Graham. They thought they were helping, I guess, Russell Wilson that way. It didn't turn out that way. And then for years were arrogant about the O-line, thinking you don't really have to devote resources there. That only turned around recently. But that was really the issue. I understand emphasizing your franchise quarterback who you're going to have to pay $100 million to when his rookie deal is up over a defense that's likely going to age out of their prime much more quickly. But the kind of arrogance Seattle had relying on Russell Wilson without really protecting him for years, I think is where they went wrong. I think in the playoff game we just saw, they were asking once again, Russell Wilson, be Superman. And when he turned out to just be Clark Kent on that night, they can't win.
Yeah, Max, you started to go down the right path. Listen, this is not Russell Wilson is the problem with the Seattle Seahawks. What happened in Seattle was they won when Russell was cheap, okay? That's what great organizations take advantage of. when you decide to pay a great player, which Russell Wilson is, and what Seattle should have done, you have to hit on your draft. Name the last time Seattle hit on their first-round pick. It's like 10 years ago. That's what has caught up to this organization. They haven't hit on their first picks. Look at the teams that are left in the NFC when it comes to the playoff race. Green Bay, you have to go back 2 years. They hit on Jair Alexander. Tampa Bay, they hit on Tristan Wirfs. The Los Angeles Rams traded away a pick for Jalen Ramsey. That's a hit. The New Orleans Saints have hit on back-to-back first-round picks. The Seattle Seahawks, once they paid Russell, stopped drafting well early in the first round. They've had some second-round picks that have been good. Obviously, Lockett, DK, Jerron Reed. But they haven't drafted well. That's been the big problem with this organization is Russell has kept them here because he's such a great player. They had to pay him, but their drafting has dropped them down to here. Their drafting hasn't allowed them to jump with the payment of the quarterback and then the kind of refurbishing of the roster. They haven't been able to pick up one of those defensive linemen that was dominant, like a Michael Bennett or a Cliff Averill. They haven't picked a defensive back that became a Richard Sherman. They haven't picked a defensive back that became an Earl Thomas. That's what's been wrong with this organization and this football team. It just catches up to them. They're really good because of Russell. They're not great because of their poor early draft picks.
Stephen A., if you can hear me, I'm going to answer Dan's point, and you can infer what he said from my response and maybe respond, because I understand you couldn't hear what Dan had to say.
Sure.
Let me just say, Dan, as to your point that they keep missing early in the first round, but they hit on Russell Wilson in the third round originally. So like they are, unless you think they just lucked up into that, they did a very good job, a phenomenal job of drafting a Hall of Fame quarterback,
right,
not early in the first round, not in the second round, but in the third round. In terms of where they went wrong, sure, they could have drafted better. But the fact is, we all know Russell Wilson is expected to be Superman. And it's not so much that he was god-awful, but Russell Wilson hasn't been Superman now for, the second half of the season?
Right.
Now including a playoff game. Also didn't win a playoff game last year. They're going to have to get him some help.
Well, for me, listen, I think they're going to have to get him some help. But Dan, I mean, did I hear you start off your soliloquy calling us puppies? Is that what you said? Did you call us that?
Yeah,
that was upon
Little
my
pups.
Initial.
Oh, I can't hear him now. Oh, he's lucky I can't hear him now. Let me say this to you, Dan. I'm not taking anything away from the greatness of Russell Wilson by any stretch of the imagination, but I do, and I understand what you're talking about, Max. If you got to invest in somebody, you invest in your quarterback, not necessarily your defense or just defensive person. I totally understand where y'all are coming from. I'm just saying that if you're Pete Carroll, what has been the ingredient to your success? Because when we look at Russell Wilson, he ain't the type of dude that's usually been famous for having some high-powered offense, going out there and dropping 30 a game or whatever. He's the kind of person that always responds to the challenge, comes through in the clutch, and delivers you what you need most when you need it most. That's been his MO. You need a defense to set the tone. We're going to talk about Russell Wilson being great, but when we talk about Super Bowls, you got to have that defense, particularly when you're in Seattle playing for Pete Carroll. That seems to me to be the ingredient to their success, and that's what I think they've gotten away from.
You ain't lying, Dan.
But so what? The question is, did they make the mistake prioritizing? No, they paid one of the top 6 quarterbacks in the NFL. Again, when you do that, you have to draft really well. You can't miss. When you pay a quarterback, your opportunity to miss is small. Your margin for error is small, both in the draft and the free agency market. So when you decided to pay Russell Wilson, were they going to let him walk? Were they just going to go, you know what, we prioritized our defense over a guy that we think is going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback? Max, you said it.
Well,
and so you got to pay him. But then when you do that, you can't draft that poorly early on.
Dan, for our audience out there, we have technical difficulties, so I can't hear Dan, and I didn't hear what Dan said, but I figured it out. Dan wanted to make sure that I was the person that didn't hear that argument, that weak argument that he tried to throw out there. But don't worry about it. You can run, but you can't hide. You sat up there and you manipulated stuff technically, so I wouldn't hear you and get at you. But I will get at you another day, my brother. You'll be around.
Here's what he said.
I will get you.
You can't let Russell Wilson walk, Stephen A. You can't let him walk, bottom line.
I'm not letting him walk.
Really, what you need to
I don't
take
have a
away from
voice.
this
Stephen A. doesn't have
segment,
ears.
Stephen
talking
A.,
about Russell
you're
Wilson.
not a dog, you're a pup.
Molly.
Just remember that.
Molly,
Okay?
best thing that happened
keep it
to
going.
I'm
best
a
thing that
pit bull
happened to
compared to
America
most.
today.
Let's be clear.
Best thing that
Let's be
happened to
clear.
America today. Stephen A. can't hear and Max can't talk.
I said I can't hear you, Dan. Didn't I say I can't hear you?
Classic. All right, we're out. Bama, Ohio State. Who will be crowned national champ? It goes down in Miami tonight.